Welcome to the Run Radio podcast. My name is Trina Wilcox. My guest today is Dr. Joseph Garcia. Welcome.
Hello. It's nice to be here with you today.
Thanks for being here. I was watching some of your videos on sign language for youngsters. So tell me a little bit about how you have actually been working since the late 80s on improving parent-infant communication. So talk a little bit about why that was important to you.
Well, when I was associating with the deaf community, I was a sign language interpreter at the time. And I noticed that their little children who were hearing but were raised by deaf parents were communicating clearly in sign language a year before they could articulate clear words. And I was concerned that why don't hearing people do that also communicate with their infants before they can speak? And it was because of the attitude that hearing people have about the deaf community that they sign so they may not talk, which is a kind of a silly idea, but it's just one of those fears that some people had. So once I did research and found out that not only can babies talk once they sign, but they have more to say because they've had language for a whole year before they can finally articulate the various global languages, but they could use their hands to communicate and they understand the world around them much sooner than they can express themselves about that understanding. As a result, I started to sign with my children, and I did a clinical study at the university when I was in graduate school and proved that babies could not only sign, but that they would talk. They would be so loquacious, you can't shut them up, in fact. But the difference is that when children have language during that cultural imprinting time, the first 3 years of life, it really excels their comprehension of the world around them and allows them to express their fears, joys, what interests them. And that's a really important thing for parents to understand. So once I saw that happening, I did it with my children and saw the amazing results. I decided to do a clinical research, publish a book about it, and the rest is history.
Tell a little bit about what the book journey was like for you, getting that research and putting it out there.
Well, initially, you have to understand this is a new concept, or it was back in those days. In fact, in Europe, they kind of thought it was one of those new American fads. But actually, once at first, people were a little bit reluctant about the whole thing. But once they started seeing the results where their babies were communicating clearly, and it really enriched their lives and helped their children become more confident in themselves, as well as discovering that internal resource. I think the biggest thing I found from this is that when children start to sign, they begin to navigate through life rather than waiting life to happen to them. They engage with life. And that sets and stage an attitude about being more proactive in going after life. So I think sign language is more than just not just cute, that it allows parents to understand what their children are wanting or saying or anything, but it gives children the capacity to kind of discover within themselves their capacity to affect the world and navigate through life rather than having riding the roller coaster of life with no control over what's going on around them. So I think there's some really important fundamental issues that come along with sign language with babies that go beyond just the cuteness of seeing babies sign.
Talk a little bit about what some of those basic things are that parents can be doing, like the I'm hungry, or just it's not meant to be an elaborate knowing everything. It's, you said, like, simple. Their babies and youngsters are speaking in one word sentences, as you put it. So kind of explain that the parents don't need to know the full gamut right off the bat.
Oh, yeah, of course. Well, the idea is that babies speak in one word sentences, as you mentioned. Anyway, they when they want to nurse, for example, they're not going to say, "I want to nurse, mom. Can I have something to drink?" They're going to just sign for milk, where they just squeeze their hand together like you're milking a cow. And if the mother would use that sign every time she nurses, you'll see the baby sometimes will unconsciously be making the sign while the child is nursing. And then eventually, when they reach their hand out and do the milk sign, and mom nurses them and they get, or gives them the bottle, whichever. But the point is that they get a response for their initiation of communication. It really reinforces that process. And there's two things that happen. Number one, it excites the child because the child can express themselves, of course. And number two, it gives the parent a real clear indication of what the baby needs or wants. And that accelerates their, how would you say, engagement with the child. I have lots of moms saying, and dads especially, because dads don't get involved with their kids until they can talk as much. But now dads, because they sign, are getting a lot more involved with their little infants. And also moms saying it changes the way they parent because now their babies are communicating with them and they will just want to engage at a much deeper level because they have that tool that they didn't have before. So and because you only sign, let's say, for example, the main sign of the whole thought of the concept. For example, if you're getting ready to go someplace and you can say, okay, we're going to go somewhere, you just sign the sign out. We're going to go outside, outside, and then you go ahead and get the baby dressed and all that, and they go outside. But the child now knows what's coming next. And a lot of the signs that I have in my 14-day program are there's about I would say 20% of them are caregiver signs, signs that a parent would make to a child that doesn't really, the child won't make so much to the parent, but they're guides to the child on how to behave or how to move or not to touch something, or things that'll help guide the child in their development or in their understanding of the world. Whereas about 80% of the signs are signs that the child can watch, observe, discover, and then use. And by the way, an important concept of this is that we don't force feed signs to a baby. You want to just sign normally the one important sign for each event and let the baby discover the sign on their own internal resources. And then when they produce the sign eventually and you respond to it, that reinforces that engagement process and that discovery process, and that kind of excites the child to learn more signs and produce more signs. Because at first, baby will learn milk, for example, or eat, or something like that, a very simple gesture. And they think that gets them what they want. So we have a lot of babies who use the sign for milk for everything they want. So
Mhm.
that's why it's important that babies are exposed to lots of different vocabulary, different signs for the things that are interest to them and that they need. And that's why my 14-day program, a lot of research went in to find out exactly what parents need to explain to their children, what children need and want when they're a very young age, and how to communicate those things in a way and model the signs and not teach the signs. We don't want to teach anything to a child that young. You want to just model the signs and let this baby discover the signs. That's why I put a lot of time into developing my baby sign language in 14 days. It gives parents much more than eat, milk, and more. So many parents teach eat, milk, and more, and then they stop. Can you imagine a baby being confined to 3 words when they understand so much more around them? So I really advocate that parents use my 14-day program, because each day you learn a small group of signs about a different event throughout the day. By the time you're done with 14 days, you've learned signs for lots of events that happen throughout your normal life. As a result, you give vocabulary to your baby, and that allows your baby to understand the world around them and then express themselves with those single sign sentences that allow them to communicate what their needs, wants, or fears may be. And that allows the parent, of course, to respond more specifically to what that child needs. And that really increases the bond, increases the communication, and everything goes a lot smoother, reduces tantrums, or if you do have a tantrum, the duration is reduced because you have communication.
I love that. So I want to go back to the model it and not teach it. In other words, are you saying that it's not a reward type situation where you wouldn't withhold, the food until they make the gestures? That kind of
Oh
what you're saying,
God.
like definitely, yeah, you're not training like you would a dog,
No,
right?
no,
That's
no.
what you're getting at.
Yeah,
No.
I strongly suggest that you never withhold care waiting for a baby to sign.
Well,
That is not
no.
a here, get a treat, doggy kind of a
Yeah.
thing. This is a human being who wants to learn to communicate. They are hungry for communication. They don't know how to communicate. Their vocal mechanism hasn't matured to the point where they can articulate the various global languages, but their hands have dexterity enough to make simple gestures. And that's why you don't force feed signs on a child. That's disruptive to their creative and their learning capacity. You want to just model the signs. That's why the 14-day program is so important. It does, when I first created this whole program many years ago, a lot of parents saw it and said, "Oh, this is cute, signing." And people with deep pockets would put together a quick program of a bunch of signs and put it out there on the internet. And I'm going, "Oh my gosh, they're missing the point. They're just
Oh,
trying to respond to what they see and not what they know." And if you study cognitive development, language acquisition, and how a child learns, then you can put together a program that gives the child the most benefits, gives the parents the most benefit, and still doesn't force feed anything on a child. And that's why the Baby Sign Language in 14-day program is, I think, it's not the biggest program out there, but by far it's the best program out there. And it's, I'm to the age now where I'm not trying to advance my career. I'm trying to leave a legacy now. So we even priced it really low to make most of these programs are over $100 or way out there. One of, I think, Baby Einstein, which doesn't make your child any smarter, is like 300 or some dollars. I don't think that's the way learning should be. It should be free, as far as that goes. But of course, we have some expenses to put everything together. So we try to keep the price really low so that parents can afford it and use it in their everyday lives. But yeah, I think that the 14-day program is designed specifically for busy parents. It allows you to slowly evolve over 14 days, a few signs each day because we're trying to get the parents to learn the signs. The babies are open books. They're ready to absorb and
yeah.
suck in everything, all the knowledge and information. It's the parents that need to be trained. And that's why the 14-day program is just designed for parents to learn small, digestible groups of signs during different events throughout the day that they do. And within a couple of weeks, you've learned 80 signs, not just 3 or 4. And it's not a real studying process. You just learn 3 or 4 gestures during each event throughout the day. Before you know it, you've got all these signs and your baby's exposed to all this great vocabulary. And as a result, when they start to express themselves, like some typically developing babies, when they start to talk, they'll say, "This is a ball." But the signing babies will say, "Yeah, and it's red and it bounces this high." And they have language. You have to understand, we learn based on the fundamental foundation of what we know, and then we build on that. So when you have a language for a whole year before you begin to speak, once you speak, you have something to say. So because you've been processing language in your head for this whole year, while other babies are cooing and crying and making little gestures, but they're not, and they're hearing the rhythm of our languages and so forth and so on, but they haven't really practiced articulating them. So when they finally do, these signing babies, they tend to garble their speech a little bit more initially because they have so much to say. They know the language. They want everything to come out at the same time. But eventually, when it does, they do get it straightened out in their minds. Boy, they have so much to say, and they can use language so well because they've been signing for a whole year. I think, the people that say, "Well, when should I start?" I say, well, the 14-day program is designed so that you begin about the 4th month modeling the signs. Babies can start to focus and see what's going on around them at that distance with what I call a parenting distance at about the 4th month. But you don't expect anything back for at least 2 or 3 months, if not more, because remember, we speak for 2 years before a baby articulates their words back. So I think the investment of 2 or 3 months of signing is way valuable and worth the investment in time, because once you do that for a couple of months, then all of a sudden your baby starts to express themselves and sign. I'll tell you, some babies express sign one here, one there, they add 1 or 2. Some babies don't sign at all, and then all of a sudden explode with a whole bunch of signs. Everyone's a little different. So don't ever try to gauge or compare your baby with other babies. There's such a huge difference in growth and knowledge and acceleration and learning and in the first 3 years of life. Around the 5th year, things balance out and all kids come around the same basic level of understanding, except for children who have disability needs or other issues, but most typically developing children balance out around the fifth year. But you start around the fourth month, give it a few months to model the signs at every opportunity. Consistency is the important thing, just like speech. We don't
Mhm.
say three words and stop talking. We say words every day. And yes, you do say the word along with the sign, or you say the sentence as you make the sign. If it's like, are you hungry now? Do you want to eat? And you can say that whole sentence and just sign one sign. That's fine, because the concept is that sign language is a bit conceptual. In fact, when I sign the sign eat, I'm signing I'm hungry, I want some food. All those concepts are all built into the sign for eat. And that's the way a lot of signs for infants are, like as you mentioned, one word sentences. They say one gesture, and that means an entire idea. For example, my son used to have a Dr. Seuss book, and there it was the foot book. They have little feet, big feet, green feet, yeah, all these different feet. Well, we would go through the book, and when we change diapers, we say it's time to change. We do the change sign, and eventually, when I do the change sign, my baby gets in position to be changed, which is great. And then I do the stay sign, put my hand on his chest and say stay, so he doesn't roll around in his mess. And when he's young, he doesn't move. But as he gets a little older, he can have a real mess on your hands if he starts rolling around and flopping around. So by early teaching him to stay and don't move, and then when I'm all done changing, I sign finished, the sign for finished. Well, and the finished I use a lot of different ways. Like, for example, when they're swinging on the swing and they're all done, I say, you finished? You finished? And I pick them up and take them away. So we're reading the Dr. Seuss book, the foot book, and we're getting to just about the page where the big feet. Now, the big feet is kind of a big, kind of scary looking character with big feet. And the page before we got to that page, my son would sign finished, finished, and want to get a different book because he was afraid of the character who had big feet and he didn't want to see it. So, wow, I would have never guessed that without that communication. And another time we were in the car and there was a bee in the car. No one wants to get stung with a bee. So my son was signing bee, bee, bee. And we stopped and pulled the car over, rolled down the window, and the bee got out. So we drive off again. My son keeps signing bee, bee, bee. Says, yeah, we got the bee out. The bee's fine. But he kept signing. And I looked up, there was a second bee in the car. So
Yeah.
it's like, wow, this child is just so observant and they can tell you things that impact your life. It just, to tell you what, it goes way beyond cute. When you can have a child express those ideas to you and express their fears, tell you what they want, and just tell you things that help them understand that, hey, I'm contributing to life. I'm affecting life. I'm navigating through life. I'm affecting my environment through my own internal resources. What a valuable gift to give to a little baby.
When you put this book together and the program together, did you go with a self-publishing hybrid? How did you decide to publish and what made you go that direction?
Well, I had done other things before and saw how many artists, in fact, this happened to me once when my first book, we, and the first book I wrote was called Toddler Talk, which turned into Sign with Your Baby. And I signed with a company and they messed me over. I mean, they made
Oh,
$6 million with my first book in 5 years. And I only got, I think, 8% of that.
oh.
And then for the last 15 years, they haven't sent me a dime in royalties, and they still sell my first book. But I sold my Harley Davidson and I hired an attorney and I broke the contract with them finally. And I self-published everything myself this time. So I have a brand new website. It's very simple, just drjosephgarcia.com. That's drjosephgarcia.com. And you'll see all the things and all the new products. In fact, you know, I've been studying cognitive development, language acquisition, how children learn for many, many years. And from that and from the deaf community, I also developed a brand new thing that's just really, it's as remarkable as the baby sign language program. It's using finger spelling to teach young children, preschool children, to learn to put letters together into words, see words, and then read. And we have kindergarten children using my fingerspelling book, and they're learning to read and put letters together into words and all that in a game-like activity. And some of the kindergarten teachers we tested this at say these children, when they leave kindergarten, many of them have competency in spelling first and second grade words before they even read kindergarten, and they never had to learn anything. They only did it through playing games with your fingerspelling book. So when you tell a young child, hey, I can show you how you can make on your fingers what you say with your mouth, they go, oh, show me, show me. And you show them the letters of what they say, and you show them how to pronounce the words as you make the form the different letters on your fingers. And they get excited. And the teacher said, yeah, you won't believe this. At recess, the kids go out on the playground, they sit across from each other, and they fingerspell words back and forth. It's like they really
Cool.
enjoy doing that. And, you know, when you can take learning and make it fun for young children, you set in pace an attitude about learning that carries throughout their whole life. So I think that some of these early, what I call the cultural imprinting years, those first 3 years of life, when you learn who to, fight or flight, or all those different basic intrinsic and internal mechanisms to survive in the world, to put learning as a fun thing in there is a really important aspect.
What does a person do when they're not fully functional with their hands, but they want to communicate with someone that might be hard of hearing?
Okay, well, there's two different aspects here. Number one, infants don't have full control of their fingers yet, of course. That's why
True.
the signs that we use in the baby program are general motion signs. They're not specific, very difficult to make signs. Also, I worked with elderly communities in Alaska for many years, and some of them have arthritis and don't have capacity to use their hands. What we did was what we call approximation signs. What you have to do is develop a list of the kinds of things you want to talk about that are important to that specific individual. And you can't make um, you can make a general list, yes, but each situation is going to be specific and intrinsic, or specific to that situation. As a result, it's good to develop a list of the things you want to talk about, and then what we call give approximation signs. You can use the same signs as baby signs with elderly people who don't have the full functions, because the signs are simple to make and they're about basic rudimentary needs: washing, eating, going to the bathroom, all the basic functions of life. Identifying people, talking about where your pain is, what to do, what not to do, those kind of things. And I also worked with some scuba people to develop some underwater sign language too, so you don't have to buy a $6,000 set of apparatus for your headgear. And there's so many uses for sign language in loud construction areas, all kinds of reasons too. And being an ex-military person, sign language is also useful in various combat situations also. But yeah, and speaking of the military, I also developed a complete comprehensive diagnostic course in medical communication in American Sign Language, also for the healthcare industry. That took about, oh gosh, several years working with the deaf communities from around the nation and physicians from around the country. I also have a medical background also when I was in the military. And I put together a comprehensive course in diagnostic ASL, American Sign Language, for the healthcare profession, so they can directly communicate with deaf patients. And that's all finished, ready to go. And I'm trying to raise the money right now to distribute it free to the entire country and Canada, because they also use ASL too, American Sign Language. So we're trying to get that finished up and give it away to free to the entire country. Again, it's not about career advancement, is about legacy. We're trying to
Yeah.
make an improvement in the human condition before we leave the earth. So Metasign, if you go to our website, drjosephgarcia.com, click on Metasign. Any hospital, clinic, doctor who wants to improve their communication with the deaf can have a free download course. A complete comprehensive course in medical sign language covers everything from internal problems, car accidents, domestic abuse, anything that you want to talk about with a patient is in that course.
Excellent. What are some of your personal interests that you love doing before we close? Share a little bit about yourself.
Well, I've been a musician most of my life. I ran into a magician when I was 17 years old, and he knocked my socks off. I said, I got to learn to do that. So I studied with him for a couple of years and became a magician myself because I work with so many kids and young people all the time. I decided to study, the art of prestidigitation. So I learned to be a magician, and I've been a magician for about 50 years now. So I do lots of shows for kids and stuff, and adults too, but mostly kids. And music, my father made me learn four instruments: a string instrument, percussion instrument, wind instrument, and a piano. So I make all the music for my websites too. It's kind of fun to record the different tracks and put them on top of each other and make it kind of unique and different. But I like music, magic. I like to ski and snowboard and ice skate and rollerblade. And I don't skateboard anymore because I'm 73 and I'm afraid of breaking bones. But I still do a lot of what they call the steep and deep. I like to real steep snow and deep snow up on the mountains. I do at Mount Baker here in Washington State. I do a lot of snowboarding and skiing there. I used to be on the ski patrol in the Alps in Europe for a while when I was a young man. So I really like to ski and ice skate and those kind of winter sports. I used to have a dog sled team. In fact, if you go to my website, drjosephgarcia.com, and look under news, you'll see me running my dog team up in Alaska. And there's also, you'll see also, I got a chance to meet Jane Goodall, and I got a chance to sign with chimpanzees for a while. I hung with them and
Oh,
had
neat.
conversations. That's on the website too. You can see that under news on drjosephgarcia.com. You'll see me signing with chimpanzees, and we're grooming each other and talking to each other. It's amazing. I'll tell you what, talk
Excellent.
about an epiphany experience. When you have a conversation with a chimpanzee, life changes forever. The animal kingdom is a different world for me now after I've had a conversation with a chimp. And not just, I was one of the few people allowed to go in with all the chimps and talk with them because I was one of their friends. I knew their language. I used to teach sign language at the university where they were at. And so all the students who wanted to work in the chimp lab to document their communication had to take my class first. But because I was the teacher, I got a chance to go in with 4 or 5 chimps and talk with them. And these chimps, even though they're about half my size, with one hand, they can squeeze your arm and break it. They're so strong. But when they're your friends and you hang with them, you have a lot of fun with them. They're so much fun. And they tease you and they play with you just like a little child would. It's really amazing.
What did they have to say? Were they just being
Well,
playful or what did they tell
yeah,
you?
yeah. Like for example, so I'd go in and I'd say, what do you want to play? They say, play chase. So we play chase, and we would take, because people take pictures of them all the time. So I went to an old photography, but I used to have a dark room, and I was into photography for a while. So I brought some old cameras into the chimp lab, and I gave each chimp a camera to play with because they always see people taking pictures of them with cameras. So they wanted to play camera sometimes. So I'd bring them cameras, and we take pictures of each other. They pretend to take pictures and stuff. And one time, oh, this is the great time. I asked them. I said, "Hey, I was teasing the chimps one time. I said, I'm going to go get food for me, not you." And there's this sign. This is a sign for dirt. When they go in the cage, we have to clean it up, and we use the sign dirt to mean the stuff that they drop in the cage, and we clean that up. So when I said I'm going to go get food for me and not you, the chimp pointed at me and signed dirt, dirt, dirt. So he was cursing at me. He was calling me poop if
Oh
I
my
didn't get food for him. It
gosh.
was so funny. It was just, oh my God, that's
That is
amazing.
great.
And so I said, no, I'm just teasing, teasing, teasing food for you. And then he got really excited and jumped up and down and everything. So it was just, I mean, they're just like little tiny kids, they're just, even though they're like 4 years
Yeah.
old, they have the same emotions as a little child. They want to play. They get really emotional. They get really excited. And, uh, and again, one of them even challenged me once. They jumped up on me and put their teeth right in my shoulder, getting ready to
Ooh.
chew down on that bone there. And I looked at him and I showed him my teeth and I growled and I signed no, no bite, no, no bite. And so he dropped down. After that, I never had a problem with that chimp again. In fact, we became really good friends. But there is that challenge, that are you going to stand your ground, or
Yeah.
are you going to be submissive to me? And I stood my ground with all the chimps enough. So I didn't try to dominate them, but I was their buddy. I was part of the group. But again, the whole point of this, the experience of communicating through signs with chimps was an amazing experience. And I'm not saying your kids are like chimps, but I'm just saying, boy, to have that experience with your own child, to be able to communicate before they can talk, is probably one of the most amazing, rewarding experiences I ever had. And I've heard that from thousands. Literally, I've worked with more than 5,000 families over the last 25 years or so. And I'll tell you what, I hear the same thing across the board. Moms and dads both say it's the most amazing experience you can have with your young child at that first couple of years of life, to have that clear communication.
Very neat knowledge. Thank you so much for sharing. Tell people one last time where they can go find out all about you and your program.
drjosephgarcia.com. It'd be DrJosephGarcia.com, drjosephgarcia.com. And there's a bunch of buttons there. You can see the fingerspelling book, the baby sign language stuff, the chimpanzees under news, and there's a whole bunch of really interesting articles. This podcast will be on there at some point on the website, along with all the other podcasts and other things I've done around the world. I travel a lot. I've been flown to France and to England to help promote my programs over there, and Japan. Although I went to France to promote it in Japan because the Japanese met me in France to try to do, and then they stole my stuff too and didn't give me any royalties. But
Oh
they,
no.
oh yeah, I've been stepped on so many times. It's just, but being number one, an author, being a minority author, I'm Potawatomi, Nigerian, and Scottish. Talk with a Hispanic last name. Talk about a hodgepodge of
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
But I was born and raised in Wisconsin, lived in the bush of Alaska. Now I live out in the Pacific Northwest in the forest, and travel around. And I'm starting to travel again a little bit. In fact, right now I'm helping raise grants for the Northwest Indian College. It's a indigenous 4-year institution here in the Bellingham area. It's a great university for indigenous students, and I've been helping them raise grants these days, as well as promoting my programs and things too. But more importantly, again, it's legacy time. You got to leave something behind,
Yes.
So
I do believe you're doing that.
I'm
Thank
trying
you
to.
very
I'm trying
much.
to. Yeah, yeah.
Come back anytime.
Thank you for inviting me to your show. I appreciate it.
Thank you.